That looks great, Chair. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wilson, and thank you, everyone, for reconvening for today's afternoon session. I did want to briefly note potentially a couple of minor changes in the agenda in terms of the issues that we would address. And this is based on a number of the bodies just having completed their work and wanting to provide adequate time for them to gather their thoughts and their notes for presentation to the Commission. So our proposed agenda for the remainder of this afternoon would be to pick up a presentation by Dr. Alan Hicks concerning issues related to the management strategy evaluation process, receive the PAB report, then receive the conference board report. Then we will take up the regulatory proposals. And then finally, there were a number of public comments that came in after we migrated away on Tuesday, and we would have an opportunity to receive those public comments as well. Commissioner Ryall, I'll turn to you to see if that's an acceptable agenda for this afternoon.
Yes, it is. Thanks, Glenn.
Great. Thank you very much. So Dr. Wilson, back to you and Secretariat staff for the MSc presentation.
Great, thank you very much. So I'll pass to Dr. Hicks, and I believe he has a couple of slides to put up as well. Over to you, Dr. Hicks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I attempted to share my video, but it seems to not be coming up for some reason. Might be a bandwidth issue. So you might not get to look at my face for this one. I'll just wait for the presentation to come up. While that, oh, there I am. While the presentation's coming up, there it is. I just want to remind everybody that on Tuesday, after presentation, there was discussion among the commissioners and a conclusion that they would like to learn a little bit more about what is to be done in 2022 regarding the MSE, the timeline specifically, and what decisions are needed for to bring results to the annual meeting in 2023. So there's a short presentation on those. Again, just a reminder, the program of work. These are the tasks, the priority tasks within that program of work, some related to the framework, some related to the management procedures to be simulated and evaluated. And then that last one, E3, called evaluation task, that is really a task more about just improving the methods and the outputs that are useful for presenting the simulation results to stakeholders and commissioners. So here's a little timeline of 2022 with a number of important meetings put onto that timeline throughout the year, noting that many of these meetings are listed in document 15 associated with AM098 on the meeting calendar. So what I have in here starting from our current annual meeting in the spring sometime would be a MSE information session where I would likely present where we're at with the MSE. The goal would be some preliminary results so that you know, anybody interested may join that and get more insight into where the MSE is at and what they might be looking at later in the year. We have two SRB meetings, one in June, one in September, on the calendar right now. And in that June meeting for SRB, we'd be presenting the framework, the operating models, and looking for just, you know, any recommendations from the SRB on improvement on those or to sign off on those so that we can really begin the simulation process. And then at the September SRB meeting would be bringing the results to them and asking for their assistance with evaluation and looking at those results. We have scheduled MSAB meeting in October. There are no specific dates to those at this point in time. although I looked at the calendar and I think October 25th to 27 might be good dates for me and my schedule at least, but that's something to be discussed. And that is where we'll really dive into the MSE results and the evaluation of those, and the MSAB can then make recommendations in their report that the commission would see at the interim meeting along with MSE results, and then at the annual meeting 99 in January 2023, where a full set of results evaluation will be presented to the commission. So where do these tasks fit on this timeline? I really would like to cut off any more work on the framework tasks in February sometime. And that is common in MSE. You work really hard on getting that framework done, and then you just stop working on that, accept where it's at, and then begin the simulation process. And so after that time in February, I'd begin some preliminary simulations, putting together those management procedures so that I can bring those to that MSE information session. And you know, then those management procedures and the simulation would then really occur over the spring and the summer so that I can have those prepared at the end of August to bring to the SRB. And then the evaluation task is something that we're just always working on at the commission, in how to better present to the stakeholders and commissioners. And more specifically, you know, we can talk to the SRB about some of those and hopefully gain some insight from them. So putting this into a list, this is what it looks like with the different tasks listed under those three categories of framework, MPs, and evaluation, and noting that sort of the deadlines or the milestones for each of those categories of tasks. I mentioned the MSAB meeting, Management Strategy Advisory Board, the 17th session of that, potentially meeting 25 to 27 of October. Those are my personal proposed dates. Those are open to negotiation, of course. But here's a preliminary agenda that might come up. And, you know, I'd review the framework updates that were made, the management procedures that were simulated, and the bulk of the meeting would then be spent on evaluation. We wouldn't necessarily be revisiting objectives and performance metrics. The commission already has a very nice set of objectives and performance metrics, but it would be a review of those and a look at which ones we would be prioritizing for the investigation of or evaluation of size limits and multi-year assessments. So a lot of that meeting will be spent identifying best performing management procedures and then, of course, formulating recommendations to the commission. So I want to leave you with the recommendation slide that was presented Tuesday morning related to the MSE work. And I've modified this slightly by adding in a couple sub-bullets under each of these recommendation items. And hopefully these sub-bullets will give you some idea of what the Secretariat is looking for from the Commission in terms of recommendations. So the first recommendation is related to size limit management procedures. And really the plan that the Secretariat staff have is to look at no size limit and a 32-inch size limit. And we can do other size limits as needed, but that's sort of a minimum that we would like to look at. And so we'll take additional Commission recommendations on that. The second management procedure was the multi-year assessment. And I just want to note there's been some questions throughout the meeting this week whether or not this means that the FIS, the survey, the IPHC survey would also be multi-year. And no, what this is referring to in multi-year assessments is only the stock assessment would be performed every other year, every third year. The survey would occur annually. As I think Dr. Stewart mentioned in one meeting sometime, you know, we see this as one of the best surveys in the world, and it's a very useful survey to conduct annually, and it provides a ton of information, and we definitely do not want to lose any of that information. So even though the assessment might be done every second or third year, the survey would occur every year. So given that, you know, the staff plan would to be simulating biennial stock assessments with an annual FIS or survey, and potentially triennial as well, just to see how different that is. But the biennial would be a minimum. The staff plan related to what happens between assessments, because there would be no assessment advice to the commission to make decisions on the TCUI. One choice in there would be a constant TCUI every year, just as we've simulated in the past, where that just remains constant, and distribution, all the regulatory area TCUIs remain constant in non-assessment years. But the staff is also formulating some very simple empirical rules that would use the FIS data that would come in annually. And so we're right now formulating what might be some simple empirical rules to show as an example. And I think that will be very useful and informative when comparing it to a constant TCY approach. And so we're looking for additional commission recommendations from there also. That is the end of this presentation. I'll leave this slide up and can take any questions from the commission.
Commissioner Yamada.
A little bit confused as to, when you speak about MPs and your framework, the framework, when you say MPs, is that the things that, you're going to, I think we kind of halted a lot of the work that you were doing on sorting through all those different MPs were propagated, and we found out and concluded that we weren't going to be able to do any kind of coast-wide distribution because of a lot of conflicts politically in that work. So when you mention framework and MPs, is that talking about size limits and, biannual or, a multi-year distribution? Is that the MPs you're talking about, or is it more analysis in the area that we were heading in previously, which is further defining those objectives and MPs? I don't know if I'm getting to my question, but
thank you, Commissioner Yamada. A really good question. What I'm referring to here is MPs, or management procedures, sorry for the acronyms, but are really specific to size limits and multi-year assessments. Noting that we have to have some rules in those management procedures for determining coast-wide TCUI and distributing that TCUI. So because the commission did not prioritize further investigation of the distribution procedures, and agreements are expiring in 2023, the plan right now was to bring forward or to use in these management procedures a pretty simple distribution method, similar to what like the current interim agreement or the current management procedure is without the agreements. And I think that will still be useful. It'll provide the general look and comparison across these management procedures in relation to size limits. And we can always add in additional distribution methods if the commission finds that they would like to see alternatives there. So I guess in a sense it may be useful to have some direction from the commission on what is sort of a base or a base management procedure that we would use to then test these size limits. And the plan of the Secretariat was to use the current interim management procedure without the agreements, which are set to expire in 2023.
Could you inform us as to exactly, under the current interim agreement, what MPs are we
I'm not sure if Commissioner Yamada has paused. I'm not getting any more audio, though.
Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you now.
These under the current interim agreements, can you be more specific as to what MPs would we be forwarding, under which we would analyze the size limits and, multi-year distribution? I'm not quite sure what MPs we're actually operating on and currently under our interim agreement.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Yamada. That what I see as a base sort of management procedure to then investigate size limits and multi-year assessments would be using the SPR-based approach, where you have that coast-wide scale and some SPR value, and we will determine the appropriate SPR values to use, starting, of course, with the 43%, which is currently, adopted by the Commission. And then once you have that coast-wide TCY, the question is, how do you distribute that to the regulatory areas? And the base interim management procedure, as I see it, is using the 032 stock distribution from the survey, and then applying those relative harvest rates. And that is where it would stop at this point in terms of a base. But as I noted, we already have 11 management procedures we have evaluated and simulated in the past that were reported last annual meeting. We can choose from any of those, add those to this list for simulation and testing these size limits as well. That may be useful in examining how does distribution affect size limit, for example. I do caution, though, that in any sort of simulation with these, and you have multiple elements you're choosing from, if I, for example, have 2 size limits and then 11 distribution procedures and 3 SPR values, that adds up to a lot of different combinations, which can be very time consuming. So I try to keep things simple in a sense of what are we really looking for and what can provide the information that the Commission is looking for. I think that base that I mentioned, stopping at relative harvest rates, would be useful in examining size limits, but it might be useful to add an additional distribution procedure just to see if there's any changes when you distribute the TCY differently.
Trying to rank all of these MPs and select 1 or 2. Would that be happening again, and time devoted to that?
That would be something I would like to avoid, is losing the sight of these management procedures that are the priority to the Commission, size limits and multi-year assessments. And as I think you alluded to at the beginning of your question, is that the distribution procedures can be consuming, you might say, and it might become that might become the focus instead of what the Commission has prioritized in terms of size limits. So I think keeping it as simple as possible in that aspect, maybe bookending it or something like that, just to see the range of options would be helpful.
Too, like that's pretty insightful. One thing I heard from MSAB members is, particularly obviously Canadian MSAB members, is the ranking, and they're not having an ability to look at a couple of different ranking styles and have that discussion and that back and forth that MSAB is so known for. So it was my understanding that that could be under presentation of the results or evaluation of results, have a discussion around looking at the different or some other different ranking styles. Possibly, green is go and red is stop, because I'd heard that at one MSAB meeting I participated in. Just wondering if that could fit into a schedule for the spring meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner DeGrief. Yes, that would definitely fall into the category, or that category of evaluation. And I think that is, one thing that I would really like to do some work on, is how to really identify best performing management procedures, especially when you have a very large set of them. Looking back, we introduced ranking as something that we hoped would be helpful to the MSAB, and especially in winnowing down the large set of management procedures into the best performing ones, not realizing that it would become a point of, well, there's many different approaches. So, it was a last minute thing, and in hindsight, would have been nice to think about that a little bit more. But now we have that opportunity to do that. So yes, I would like to do a little bit of work on the ranking. However, looking at the management procedures that are under consideration for this year, will be simulated this year, it's a relatively small set, I think. And I don't know that ranking would be necessarily necessary in this evaluation in 2023, or for annual meeting 2023, because we'll likely have a small set of size limits, and it'll be pretty clear of any patterns that come out of that. They aren't, it's going to be no size limit to a 32-inch size limit, or in that range. And you'll see a pattern in all of these performance metrics. So you'll be able to sort of pick your point along those patterns rather than trying to rank them. And the same with the multi-year approach. I don't think it's going to be a large number, and we may not need to rank them, but we can instead look at the performance metrics and the objectives directly, and make those decisions and do those trade-offs through discussion, and individuals can then rank them in their head as they see appropriate. But you are correct. It would be nice to continue work on that ranking procedure. And if we did come up with an agreed type of ranking procedure among the objectives and management procedures, boy, that would make this process quite a lot more simple.
You're not expecting, large swings in the different results for these MPs being considered, but I think it would be important for MSAB members to, start that discussion, a little bit of back and forth, hopefully just a little bit, sooner than later.
Thank you. I'm writing notes down on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no,
I'm sure that will be made available. I'm not certain exactly how, but yeah, that could be made available. Would that perhaps be a revision on the website, Dave, or this? Yeah, we could potentially put it up as an extra PowerPoint onto the associated with the MSE document 12.
smaller size, like 26 inches, would be, I think, worth exploring. And I'm sure other commissioners will weigh on, but and I don't want to add a whole bunch. I'm just thinking about timing and yeah, amount of time you have to work on these, but I think it would be good to try something like 26 inches. On the management procedure and the question that Commissioner Yamada was asking, I think it would be useful to at least explore more than one management procedure and get a bit of a range. And I don't mean like 11 management procedures for sure, Alan. I think that's not going to be helpful, but I do think it would be maybe some subset of those or something along those lines, maybe 3 or 4 management procedures. That would be worthwhile exploring just to see the impacts of having those explored with these types of size limits and the multi-year assessment. And thanks for clarifying about the set line survey, that it would be on an annual basis and that the stock assessment itself would be one that would, as you said, I think you said potentially maybe every 2 or 3 years, but something like that. And so maybe a follow-up question on that is, you may not have had time to think about this, or Dr. Stewart, but if the stock assessment was only done every 2nd year or every 3rd year, have you thought about what effort would be expended on some of the other items that that have come forward from both internally but also from the SRB? So I'll stop there, but those are my thoughts based upon what I heard so far.
Thank you, Commissioner Royal. That was very informative and very helpful too. And I agree with what you said there, and I don't see a problem with at least the suggestions you made with the management procedures. You know, having commission direction on what that range of various distribution procedures might be. I can always provide some advice, what I think would be a range of options from the 11 that we've simulated in the past, perhaps. But it'd be helpful to have some commission direction on where they would like to see that range, what that range may incorporate in the future or in these simulations. And I completely agree, it would be useful to see a range of distribution just to make sure they're similar or how they differ with size limits or multi-year approaches. Related to your last question, what might be the benefits of not conducting a stock assessment every year? And the Secretariat has had that discussion with the Scientific Review Board. And I'm sure that discussion was had also in the performance review, where this was actually recommended to look at these multi-year approaches. Off the top of my head, some of the benefits of not conducting an assessment every year, in terms of the Secretariat, it would free up some time for you know, a very busy person, Dr. Stewart, who spends, you know, at least 4 months of his year either preparing and conducting and then presenting that stock assessment. And 4 months might be a underestimate of the amount of time it takes. So that would free up his time to improve the stock assessment. You know, a lot of his time is just spent collating data and making sure that the current stock assessment is run. So we could make improvements to the stock assessment. We might bring in different approaches, like different approaches to characterize uncertainty, things that might take longer. Markov chain Monte Carlo or MCMC is one example. We just aren't able to do that given the short timelines now. And then helping with the research plan and, you know, having more involvement with the biological and ecosystem services branch and the research that they're doing. It would free up some time for that. And then selfishly, it might give Dr. Stewart a little bit more time to collaborate with myself, and I would be using his skills in the MSE process. And I just want to quickly mention, other than that, related to what stakeholders might be interested in, besides improvements to the stock assessment, are it could potentially bring in some stability to the TCY across years. We looked at that a little bit in the results, but having a multi-year stock assessment approach might mean simply setting a TCY that remains in place for 2 or 3 years. And that would provide some stability for somebody that's interested in what might happen over the next 2 or 3 years. They would know what that TCY would be, or at least have a better idea. And so there's that aspect as well. So we as the Secretariat, or at least in further documents I produce, I can certainly spell out some of the benefits, and that might be part of the trade-offs that we examine when we evaluate this management procedure.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Dr. Eck. That's all the questions I have right now, Glenn.
Yeah, Glenn, you were kind of cutting out there. Can you pick me up? Am I coming through? Okay. Yes, Dr. Hicks, thanks for the presentation. My comment is short. It's similar to what Commissioner Royale's was on the size limit. I know you guys are really innovative on interactive types of things. So if it's too much work to do something where you can do a dial and see what happens at different size limits, I'd like a data point at least at 26 inches, as Commissioner Ryle commented on. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the only observation and comment I have.
For Dr. Hicks to consider term potential for both these recommendations. What would be the best way for us to be able to convey that information, and what's the process that you think we might want to use? And I'll turn to you, Paul, to see if you have some perspectives on that.
That we would like to see explored under these size limit and multi-year. And we had been speaking at our previous commission meeting about the, and at FAC, about the budget for the fiscal year 2023, and we had contemplated a special session for that. And I think, given the importance of making sure we get a good work plan for Alan and do a work plan that can meet the time constraints that we've identified, that it would may be useful to have an agenda item on that special session as well, for thinking about what sort of management procedures would be useful to explore going forward. And certainly not 11 of them, but a much smaller subset would be one thought anyhow, Glenn.
I guess my only other thought, which could be part of that discussion, is also from the process perspective, and maybe it's just sort of building off what Paul had mentioned, but in addition to sort of the resources and particular elements we would be asking for Alan to do work on and how to support him in that. Another question on my mind is how do we position ourselves collectively to be ready to respond to recommendations that come forward out of all of that work in our next annual meeting. And I think to back up from that is going to require some engagement. And so another thing that I would like to explore is whether a meeting in October with the MSAB is going to be sufficient if the meeting proposed for the spring is sort of primarily information out and on topics that may not cover all of the scope of what October expects to cover. So I think I'd also want to give some thought to that, like how do we sort of bring others along with enough opportunity so that when the recommendations do come forward, people are collectively ready to respond to them.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Yes, related to the resources, I think this work plan, I believe this work plan was developed with resources in mind, noting that the MSE team has reduced in size since last year, and it is mainly myself with the help of Dr. Stewart. But I think that timeline that I presented to you is entirely reasonable, and I'm definitely on track to complete the simulations by then. Adding a few, 3 or 4 distribution things here and there and a few more size limits, it isn't really an issue to me because this stuff will all be coded and it's just a matter of putting it on a machine and making sure it's running right. I'm not too concerned about the resources. In terms of preparing for the annual meeting 99 and everything there, the presence of an MSAB meeting, which the commissioners are certainly welcome to participate in. You always have a seat at the table at those. I just want to note the May MSAB meeting is typically a meeting where the MSAB will make requests to the commission, not the commission, the secretariat. Not recommendations, but requests to the Secretariat of potential items to include in the MSE work, for example. And I feel like there's a lot of really good direction from the Commission on this program of work. I certainly believe in information sessions so that MSAB members are kept, in the loop and are, know what's going on and have that time to, have a first look at things, think about it, and then have a second look in October. But I'm certainly open to the suggestions of the Commission on how they would like that process to occur throughout the year and what may help not only stakeholders but commissioners as well prepare for the annual meeting in 2023.
Yes, Dr. Hicks. So I guess in the same line of thinking about your limited time and I mentioned that, the May meeting, if it's just informational, the MSAB won't be, necessarily in full gear. I was just wondering your thoughts is that, are we just going to pick up where the MSAB left the last time with the management procedures? We had 11 of them and we did some ranking of them. And I think we may even gone as far as bringing these down to a couple of them. Do you foresee us just going forward with those couple MPs that were highlighted in, the last time the MSAB met? Or are you thinking about rolling back or backing up and going through some of that process again, like reevaluating the ranking and selecting a different set of MPs?
Thank you, Commissioner Yamada. I do not see myself or the MSAB, given the direction from the Commission in this program of work, of revisiting those distribution-related management procedures, any of those 11 that were presented before, or any new ones at this point in time for this. What I imagine going forward, and of course this is at the direction of the Commission, is perhaps at the special session that was mentioned, I can provide a short presentation of different distribution procedures that may be useful for examining the management procedures listed on this slide, particularly the size limit and the multi-year assessments. So in other words, identifying a range of distribution-related management procedures that were, ranked high, or ones that are similar to those that were ranked high by the MSAB, looking not only at the rankings, but also the evaluation without the rankings. And then related to that, as Commissioner DeGreef mentioned, is continue the investigation of how best to evaluate various management procedures with regard to ranking them or not, or other methods that we could use to evaluate them. I hope that's helpful.
How you might want to approach or assess this work. And then at that special session, that would provide an opportunity for additional guidance from the Commission on those specific approaches. I think we have been clear that we recognize that there are a lot of management procedures that had been considered by the MSAB, but that not all of those would be moved forward as baselines against which you would measure the performance of this. And I just want to perhaps pause for a moment to see if that is a shared understanding with other commissioners. Commissioner Rael?
Done. And with us, if we do agree to have a special session to consider some of the details we're just talking about now, in particular, what kind of management procedures do we want to see being tested, that we are not slowing him down in the work schedule that he's presented to us this afternoon. If we did that sometime, say in February, for example, or early March. And that, I guess the one thing I don't want to lose sight of, in addition to, I think, what your summary was, Glenn, is I guess the comments around process and ensuring that the MSAB folks are have enough time to provide us as commissioners guidance on this as well. And so that's why I'm still thinking that a meeting in the spring sometime would be more than just an information session, but also allow that the MSAD members to provide some feedback to Glenn, or excuse me, to Dr. Hicks. So I don't see it as just a one-way communication of just info out, but also a useful meeting to bring MSAD members up to date so they can brief us adequately going forward. No, no. No, I was thinking that we do that at the special session.
And then the feedback from the MSAB will be really more on what some potential initial results may be from some of the guidance we provide at that special session, and then what information Dr. Hicks can pull together between that special session and the MSAB.
Correct.
Dr. Hicks, does that provide you?
Sorry, Commissioner Merrill, you may have broke up at the end of there. I heard Dr. Hicks, does that provide you? And
Does that?
it does provide me with a lot.
So Dr. Hicks, the ask was, does this provide you with enough direction on the MSc work plan?
Thank you, Commissioner Merrill. This is great direction. I think this does provide me with enough to, continue working on. And to address Commissioner Rael's first, I think, question there is, would a special session slow down the MSc process? I think it would be very useful at that special session to address these MSc issues that you've identified, because one, it gives me a deadline, which I work better on deadlines, and two, I think a little bit of preparation will save a lot of time in the future. So thank you.
Okay. So I believe we've provided guidance on this issue. I will turn to other commissioners to see if there's anything else under this specific agenda item, or you, Dr. Hicks, if there's anything else we missed. I see some hands, but I think they're latent hands. If they're not, please chime in. Okay. Seeing no hands, and I think that then will take us to the end of this agenda item. Thank you again, Dr. Hicks, for walking us through that. Dr. Wilson, back to you.
Great, thank you very much, Chair, and also thanks to Dr. Hicks. So on the agenda, we have the two advisory board subsidiary body reports. The Processor Advisory Board report was going to go first, followed by the Conference Board report. So I'd ask the Secretariat to bring up the Processor Advisory Board report and invite the Chair or the Co-Chair to make that presentation. So over to the chairs. Thanks.
Hello, Commissioners. Secretariat, I just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay.
Yes, all good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. So good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Jessie Keplinger, and I was the chair of the PAB for 2022, so PAB 027, and my vice chair was Carl Nordman. It looks like he's here as well on video. Thanks, Carl. I will go ahead and start with the report, and I'll try and keep it as possible. I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to start on page 6 with the opening of the session. So the 27th session of the International Pacific Halibut Commission Processor Advisory Board was held electronically from January 20th through January 27th, 2022. A total of 25 eligible members logged an accreditation and authorization form for the meeting. However, only 16 were present at the commencement of the session from 2 contracting parties. There were also 2 proxies submitted. The list of participants is provided in Appendix 1, and the meeting was opened by Mr. Carl Nordman, acting president of HANA. We started our agenda with accreditation and authorization. Canada accredited 0 new members, and the US accredited 2 new members for participation in the 2022 PAB proceedings. These 2 accreditations were, one was for Sitka salmon shares, represented by Miss Michael Cohen, and the second was for Alaska Glacier Seafoods, representative Miss Jessie Keplinger. Election of chair and vice chair. The PAB called for nominations for the position of chair, and Jessie Keplinger was nominated, seconded, and elected as chair. The PAB called for nominations of vice chair. Carl Nordman was nominated, seconded, and elected as vice chair. The PAB adopted the agenda, and that can be seen at Appendix 2. So IPH Secretariat informational session. The PAB noted the informal presentation by Dr. Ian Stewart. The PAB noted the review of the MSE process and the MSAB reports provided by Dr. Alan Hicks. And the PAB noted the informational presentation by Dr. Basha Hutnazak, which included a broad overview of her current work to better understand the economic contribution of Pacific halibut and the connectivity to the supply chain, with initial focus on the commercial fishery. Fishing period, season opening and closing dates. The PAB recommended the following fishing period dates for 2022, an opening date of March 8th and a closing date of November 8th. The members voted 12 in favor, 4 against, with 0 abstains. Through proxy, there was 1 in favor vote and 1 abstention vote. The PAB noted that 4 members, 3 Canadian and 1 USA, voting against these dates were supportive of a longer season, something that would maybe start on March 6th and run through December 7th. Number 5, mortality limits. Oh, excuse me. The PAB agreed to support a TCEY of 41.22 million pounds, which is equivalent to a F43 fishing intensity. There was a unanimous vote. This motion passed unanimously within the PAB. TCEY recommendations. The PAB recommended the following TCEY mortality limits for the 2022 fishing period as provided in Table 1, which translate to the mortality estimates by sector provided in Appendix 3, and an SPR of 43%. The PAB voted 12 in favor, 2 against, and 0 abstains. Through proxy, there were 2 in favor, and I'll go ahead and read those numbers provided in Table 1 now. So for IPH Regulatory Area 2A, 1.65 million pounds. For regulatory area 2B, 7.56 million pounds. For regulatory area 2C, 5.19 million pounds. For regulatory area 3A, 14.37 million pounds. For regulatory area 3B, 4.28 million pounds. For regulatory area 4A, 2.39 million pounds. For regulatory area 4B, 1.8 million pounds, and for regulatory area 4C, D, and E, 3.98 million pounds, for a total mortality limit of 41.22 million pounds. I'm going to circle back up and give some rationale. So the PAB noted that the numbers in Table 1 honor the interim agreements from IPHC regulatory areas 2A and 2B. The PAB accepted the scientific advice given by Dr. Stewart in deciding on a coast-wide harvest intensity of F43. In considering area-specific distribution, the PAB used the following reasoning in designating limits for areas 2C and 3B. 2C, 5.19 million pounds. A limit of 5.19 million pounds matches what would have been the reference level for IPHC regulatory area 2C without an interim agreement, as well as coming in lower than the 2021 adopted mortality limit. The PAB acknowledged a need for adjustment down according to the survey data, but not such a dramatic drop as suggested when considering the interim agreement, which would have decreased 2C by just over 1 million pounds or 20%. Other areas in fishing region 2 either maintained their status quo or increased based off of the reference level for 2022. Further, the average weight of fish landed in 2C dropped a significant amount, which has been attributed to the recruitment from the 2012 year class and not from a lack of large fish. And then on to section B, area 3B, 4.28 million pounds. The IPHC Secretariat TCEY distribution without an interim agreement would have been 6.47 million pounds. The PAB recalled historically that there was a reduction of quota after going too high too quickly perhaps in IPHC regulatory area 3B, as well as the slow up fast down policy to present high inter-annual variations. We felt that it was responsible to not increase quota by over 100% in one area. The PAB is suggesting a 37% increase rather than more than 100% increase. The PAB noted that 2 members, 2 from USA, voted against the recommended area-specific mortality limits because they lacked confidence in the survey numbers in IPHC regulatory area 2C and were concerned with the distribution of the resource being given to regulatory area 2B, who are fishing well above the Secretariat's recommendations. I'll move on to number 6, IPHC fishing regulatory proposals for 2022. I probably will not read through the noted part. I'm just going to try and keep it a little bit tighter since most of you have probably read these proposals. So the PAB recommended that the Commission adopt the framework contained in proposal A1 with addition of mortality limits to each contracting party by sector as detailed in section 5.3. The PAB voted 12 in favor, 0 against, and 2 abstentions. Through proxy, there were 2 votes in favor. 6.12 IPHC fishing regulations, commercial fishing periods. The PAB noted proposal A2 with the addition of the fishing periods as detailed in section 4. The PAB recommended that the Commission adopt the date, format, and framework in fishery regulation proposal A2. The PAB voted 14 in favor, 0 against, and 0 abstentions, and through proxy, 2 in favor as well. IPHC fishing regulations minor amendments. The PAB noted noted the motion to adopt proposal A3. This motion failed with concerns over language regarding contracting to non-IPHC employees and their authorization to perform any tasks. And the PAB voted as 1 in favor, 12 against, and 1 abstention, and through proxy 1 against and 1 abstention. Contracting party fishing regulation proposals. The PAB noted fishery regulation proposal B1 revision 1 and agreed to abstain from making any recommendations. 13 voted in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention, and through proxy 2 in favor. Fishing regulations, charter management measures, and IPHC regulatory area 2C and 3A. The PAB noted proposal B2 and agreed to abstain from making any recommendations. 13 voted in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention, and through proxy 2 in favor. IPHC fishery regulation, fishing gear, section 18, trap gear use in IPHC regulatory area 2B. The PAB recommended that the commission adopt the proposal B3. There were 14 votes in favor, 0 against, and 0 abstentions, and 2 votes in favor through proxy. IPH fishery regulation, charter management measures, and IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A. The PAB noted proposal B4 and agreed to abstain from making any recommendations. 10 voted in favor, 0 against, 4 abstentions. Through proxy, 1 in favor and 1 abstention. Other stakeholder fishery regulation proposals. Recreational sport fishing for Pacific halibut, IPHC regulatory areas 2C, 3A, 3B, 4A, 4B, 4C, D, and E. Processing Pacific halibut for eating and or preservation. The PAB noted proposal Prop C1 and agreed to abstain from making any recommendations. 12 in favor, 2 against, 0 abstentions. Through proxy, 2 in favor. The PAB noted that they did not hear the opinion from the fisheries enforcement on Prop C1. Down to number 7, rules of procedure for the Processor Advisory Board. The PAB noted paper IPHC 2022 FAC 098-09 that proposed improvements to the PAB's rules of procedure. The PAB noted the following text from the FAC 098 report. The PAB recommended that parliamentary procedure is the preferred process for the accepted rules, ethics, and to conduct the meeting of the PAB. The PAB agreed that it would like Hannah to continue to play an active role within the PAB should the IPHC Secretariat assume the Secretariat role, utilizing Hannah as a liaison for other support services, such as pre-meeting onboarding, providing information and other documents, in-meeting support, and to help complete the minutes from the PAB meeting. Furthermore, as there is a generational transition of the members of the PAB, Hannah has remained a constant in guiding the PAB through both the process and helping chairs facilitate a productive meeting, while also providing historical context to PAB action and decision-making in past meetings. Hannah participates and compiles relevant information from many other management organizations and industry groups, which is then provided freely to the PAB members. The PAB noted that it intends to establish a working group to coordinate with the IPHC Secretariat on further revisions to the rules of procedure, which could include a role for Hannah. The next round of revisions will include, but are not limited to, clarification and weighting of proxy votes and timing of chair and vice chair elections. Please note that paragraphs 39, 40, and 41 were all voted on together and passed unanimously. On to number 8, other business. The PAB noted that a long-term distribution policy should include the following components. Mortality limits for regulatory areas are based on indices derived from the most current scientific data and a range of explicit policy choices to provide a higher level of predictability and stability in each regulatory area. Explicit policy consideration should be evaluated by the MSE framework. Negative impacts from one regulatory area to another should be minimized. Margins of uncertainty in a year-to-year coast-wide mortalities should be narrowed by using smoothing elements such as keeping maximum annual variability below 15% or slow up fast down. At the regulatory area, minimize variability in year-to-year survey abundance indices, such as 3 to 5 year rolling average as slow up fast down. Or slow up fast down. Be developed in a transparent process with adequate input from stakeholders. Continue to improve the monitoring of all removals, both in the directed and non-directed fishery, and a multi-year agreement between countries based on science to give more stability to both parties. The PAB noted that the contracting parties should begin negotiations as early as possible, recognizing that the current interim agreement will expire after the 2022 season. Paragraphs 42 and 43 were again voted on together and passed unanimously. The PAB expressed its appreciation for the assistance provided by the IPHC Secretariat and for the in-session presentations and support by Lynn Matz, Maureen Finn, and Doug Duncan, Dr. David Wilson, Dr. Ian Stewart, Dr. Alan Hicks, Dr. Basha Hutnazak, Dr. Cloud Dykstra, and Miss Tara Coluccio, and the Secretariat support behind the scenes. The review of the draft and the adoption of the report of the 27th session of the IPHC Processor Advisory Board. The report of the 27th session of the IPHC PAB was adopted on January 27, 2022, including the consolidated set of recommendations and requests arising from PAB 027 provided in Appendix 4. The PAB voted 13 in favor, 0 against, and 0 abstentions, and 2 in favor through proxy. Thank you very much for providing this time for us to review the report with you. We're happy to take any questions or make any clarifications that are needed.
And I just wanted to express my appreciation for the 2 people who abstained from the motion to abstain. I think that's worth remarking on. So thank you for that.
Here in behalf of the PAG members and HANA members and how that's coordinated.
Yeah, I may defer to Carl as he is acting president of HANA, and he may have a little bit more information to provide on that.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Halverson. HANA's throughout the years has, provided documentation and email correspondence to the PAB members leading up to the PAB meetings. And it's just also sort of been a constant, as mentioned, that there's been a little bit of a generational change with, fellow members such as John Woodruff and Blake Tipton, where they've sort of stepped away from the process. And Hannah's been that constant area where PAB members have been able to rely to Peggy, in particular, for information sort of leading up to the meetings in its preparation.
Thank you.
If I could add one short thing as well. I agree with Carl in terms of a lot of that correspondence is through email, but Peggy provides information, or the executive director of HANA provides information to all of the PAB in regards to the meetings, but also information that we should be aware of going into the meeting, so we are an informed membership and can make informed decisions, as well as providing, for those of us that are new to the process, it's a kind of a safe space to check in and figure out how we should proceed with, putting motions forward and all of that.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Participants in the PAG that aren't HANA members.
There are both members from HANA and members. The PAB is comprised of members and non-HANA members. So not all PAB members are HANA members.
So how are these non-members communicated with? Is HANA still, are they on HANA's email list to get information and notices as well as the membership?
Yes. So I think those emails are collected at the end of the meeting or public knowledge through the, through our reports. So as a new meeting approaches, everyone is given that information going forward. So Peggy provides that information to all historical PAB members or new members that are joining.
Thank you for the information. Thank you.
Is that correct? As well as weigh in on some of the other terms of reference revisions?
Yes, thank you. If the commissioners do, or if the IPHC Secretariat is, voted in or is decided to be a Secretariat for PAB, then yes, we would definitely have a working group that would help keep HANA's role relevant within the PAB and also establish a different role so that way they continue present as well as address some of the other issues. And then I can let Carl speak to it a little bit more as well, if he has anything to add.
Yeah, I think if the commissioners adopt and implement the IPHC Secretariat as a Secretariat in the PAB, then we would like to establish a working group with the IPHC Secretariat to really sort of figure out and sort out that role, and then also touch base on, the proxy issue in the rules of procedure and the election, the timing of the chair and vice chair elections.
Okay, thanks for that both. So is there a compelling reason provided to retain HANA as the administration, communications, and recruitment facilitator, or can they do the same in a like you just described, a defined role, more of assisting folks.
Jesse? Or do you want me to take that one?
Go ahead, Carl. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think the group sort of agreed that, acting as a liaison role in some sort of form of capacity could still be able to, facilitate that communication with members while allowing the secretariat to act as a secretariat role for PAB. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd also just like to have a vote of appreciation to the two chairs for the PAB for some very constructive discussions over the last couple of days, particularly on the rules of procedure. Very much appreciated to them and to the full membership. So we do have a non-fully refined version of the conference board ready for your review. And that's going to be presented by the co-chairs, Jim Lane from Canada and Linda Benkin from the US. So I'll pass to them. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Looks like you have us there, and just, I guess, oops. Hopefully we can stop the echo. Awesome.
It's
okay.
probably my
Linda
mic.
Benkin. We got you okay, Jim?
Yep.
All right, great. Well, I will dive in to the conference board report. It's fairly lengthy, but I expect you're used to that. So working from these minutes are still a bit rough. We haven't, I think as Dr. Wilson just mentioned, we haven't had a time to go through reformatting. So apologize if I stumble a little bit going through them. Starting with the opening of the session, the 92nd session of the International Pacific Halibut Commission Conference Board was held electronically from the 25th to the 27th of January. A total of 66 members attended the session from the two contracting parties. We've provided the list in Appendix 1. The meeting was chaired by Mr. Jim Lane from Canada and myself from the USA, and we welcomed everybody to the meeting. We did not accredit any new members this year. We're going to double check that, but we think that's right. We did spend a moment of silent remembrance for the passing of two longtime and very influential conference board members, Mr. Clem Tillian and Mr. Lou Doctorman, with a moment of silence before we began. The CB adopted the agenda as provided at Appendix 2 with the addition of a future management procedure discussion under Agenda Item 8.1. The documents are provided, I think you know all that, to assist the CB in navigating the meeting. All documents were on the webpage and on the conference board webpage available to participants. We did meet from the afternoon of the 25th through just about an hour before you started again here today, or maybe a half hour before you started again here today. Relative to mortality limits and TCY, the CB noted, we said informal, but very informative, it should say, presentation by Dr. Ian Stewart, and a subsequent question and answer period that covered a range of topics and included some clarity around some of the definitions of total mortality, total constant exploitation yield, with which I assume you're familiar. On the MSC update, we noted the review of the MSC process, and a question and answer session was provided by Dr. Alan Hicks. Regarding the managed procedure development for size limit, the conference board asked if the management procedure consideration was on a coast-wide scale or to regions or regulatory areas. Dr. Hicks responded, the current operating model can look at size limits at many scales, but they'd only been asked to investigate at the coast-wide scale. There was some interest from the conference board in looking at some various answers. It's not something we took up as a motion, but there was some conversation around that. Relative to the multi-regional economic impact assessment, the CB noted the information presented by Dr. Huchnitzek, which included a broad overview of our current work to better understand the economic contribution of Pacific halibut and the connectivity to the supply chain with initial focus. I think that's old wording from last year. We definitely saw information on both the commercial and the recreational fisheries in that presentation. Fishing period, season opening and closing date. The CB noted an initial motion for the following fishing periods for 2022, opening of March 6th, closing November 20th. The opening date was voted on with Canada in favor 17, against 0, with an abstention. USA in favor 21, against 6, and 2 abstaining. Then the conference board, by amendment of the original motion, changed the closing date from the 20th November to the 7th of December. That motion passed. Canada in favor 15, against 0, with 0 abstaining. USA in favor 26, against 0, and 2 abstaining. And so the season opening dates March 6th through December 7th, and would note, by way of capturing some rationale from that discussion, the conference board noted favorable tides for the opening date, also that longer seasons may be needed to allow full harvest with a large sablefish TAC in Alaska, both the sablefish and halibut seasons being linked, and the impacts of COVID on the fishery. Moving on to Area 2B, the season dates. The conference board recommended that the commission adopt IPHC Regulatory Area 2A changes and actions for the recreational and non-treaty directed fisheries proposed by the Pacific Fishery Management Council. That passed with Canada in favor 1, against 0, abstaining 18, US in favor 24, against 0, and abstaining 3. On mortality limits, the conference board noted the availability of the mortality tool. And moving into the coast-wide perspective, the conference board recommended the commission adopt an F43 for the 2022 harvest rate, along with the corresponding coast-wide TCY of 41.22 million pounds. That passed with Canada in favor 22, 0 against, 1 abstention, USA in favor 26, 3 against, and 0 abstaining. Some rationale, the conference board noted that stakeholders are encouraged by the presence of a strong 2005 and 2012 year classes, which bring the prospect of a relatively stable and/or rebuilding spawning biomass to the B36 target in the coming years. The conference board noted F43 was vetted by the MSC process and adopted by the commission at AM097 as the reference harvest strategy. The conference board noted that there was a less than 1% chance of the stock status being below the B20 threshold in the next 3 years at an F43 harvest rate, and that there was a roughly 50-50 chance that the fishery TCEY would decline by more than 10% over the same time period at F43, referencing slide 46. The conference board noted that the change in biomass is driven by recruitment strength, with less than 40% probability of the spawning biomass falling below B30. The conference board noted that Dr. Stewart indicated that the stock is being harvested close to surplus production levels at this rate and seems to be sustaining this rate as the abundance trends level off. The Conference Board noted the following from a minority of USA Conference Board members expressing the following concerns regarding F43 TCEY. There are concerns that adopting the 41.22 million pound TCEY resulting from the F43 reference level is too aggressive at this time, that intensifying the harvest rate at a time of historic low abundance is not good policy, regardless of what long-term computer models suggest, that the realized fishing intensity was estimated to be 48% in 2020 and 46% in 2021, and this minority of the Conference Board supports maintaining similar intensities as targets moving forward. The minority are concerned that estimating spawning biomass relative to unfished ratios are too close to the SB 30 level to warrant fishing at F43 and reference slide 46, that the decision table regarding the stock trend shows a 50% chance of a 3-year surplus at F46, which is where we would like to be on the table. Moving on to regulatory areas, the Conference Board recommended the Commission adhere to the interim agreement, a fixed TCY for IPHC Regulatory Area 2A of 1.65 million pounds that passed with Canada in favor 21, 0 against, 0 abstaining, USA in favor 27, 1 against, and 3 abstaining. Moving on to IPHC Regulatory Area 2B, Canada, the CB recommended the Commission adopt a TCY for IPHC Regulatory Area 2B of 7.56 million pounds as determined by the 2019 interim agreement. Canada in favor 22, against 0, abstained 0, USA in favor 2, against 29, abstained 2. The Conference Board noted the following from IPHC Regulatory Area 2B Conference Board members. Apportionment, or the O32 stock distribution, has never been accepted by Canada as the way to allocate the coastwide TCUI, nor has it been adopted by the United States Commissioners. Both contracting parties have deviated and agreed to deviate from O32 stock distribution for distributing the coastwide TCUI since apportionment was introduced. O32 stock distribution is not the only scientifically defensible way to distribute the available harvest. There are many scientifically defensible ways to distribute the available harvest. Estimating how the O32 stock is distributed is one thing. Distributing the coastwide TCUI, the available harvest, is something else. The two are separate. They're related, but they are separate. Estimating the distribution of the biomass is a science exercise, but TCUI distribution is a policy decision that is informed by science and socioeconomic considerations. This is consistent with the conclusion of the IPHC Secretariat in IPHC 2018 to SSO1-02, which states that TCUI distribution is a management policy decision where other objectives are considered, e.g. economic, social, etc. It is also consistent with what has been discussed at the MSCB meetings where participants agreed that management procedures for distributing the coastwide TCUI may be data-driven, policy-driven, or some combination of the two. Paragraph 40. The interim agreement, so I'm at F, the interim agreement combines data-driven and policy-driven elements and is scientifically defensible as proven by the MSC process and evaluations. It is also important to recognize that although the current agreement provides some mitigation of U.S. bycatch on Canada, it's only partial and only for what is happening now. There has been no mitigation for what has happened for the last 20 to 30 years. Alaska benefited from this, but Canada was not mitigated for the lost access. At H, it needs to be noted that there is scientific basis for the current interim management agreement, TCUI distribution using shares for IPHC regulatory areas 2A and 2B, and O32 distribution for IPHC regulatory areas in Alaska. The agreement was evaluated through the MSC process. However, there is no scientific basis for moving 2CUI between the IPHC, US IPHC regulatory areas in Alaska. This was not evaluated through the MSC process. This is within the purview of the Commission, and the Canadian Commissioners have worked with U.S. Commissioners. However, we need to be careful and cautious when considering it. At 25, paragraph 25, the CB noted the following from USA conference members regarding the IPHC regulatory area 2B TCY. A, slide 54 identifies that this TCY reallocates 5% more of the coastwide TCY to Canada than was found off 2B by the FISS, and 2 million more pounds relative to the O32 biomass distribution after application of the harvest rates by area, with 500,000 of that coming from Area 2C. B, the interim agreement destabilizes the Alaska Pacific halibut industry and is unsustainable. The need for a transparent process to establish a more equitable distribution of TCY between contracting parties, particularly now that the U.S. has significantly reduced bycatch. At D, the areas 2C and 3A charter fleets are suffering the direct effect of 2B TCY levels under the interim agreement that are higher than surveyed abundance. Charter operators are struggling with a reduced ability to provide clients with harvesting opportunities and maintain viable charter operations or businesses. E, the USA CB members never agreed to the interim agreement and would never support a similar agreement going forward. F, the need for stability in all areas and the inequity of providing that stability to some areas at the expense of all other areas was noted. At 5.2.3, IPHC regulatory area 2C. So what follows is rationale, as we did with 2B, specific to each of the areas, and it's long, and I apologize if it's somewhat at times repetitive. Overall 2C stocks, so starting with Area 2C, Area 2C Conference Board members noted overall 2C stocks are reasonably healthy. 2C has the highest weight per unit effort of all IPHC areas. Figure A-2 from IPHC 2022 AM098-08 document establishes a 3% increase in numbers per unit effort for 2C, but an overall decline in weight per unit effort due to a lower average weight. B, slide 1 from IPHC 2022 -10 presentation of the stock assessment indicates a large decrease in average weight of landed fish, approximately 20% in 2C as well, yet the commercial weight per unit effort in 2C only declined by 2%. These factors imply increased abundance of smaller fish rather than a sharp decline in abundance. Dr. Stewart's response to Commissioner Yamada's question on the 2C reduction, noting that most of the 2C reduction in 2C is being driven by the strong incoming 2012 year class, which is still highly mobile. D, MSE output, that MSE model outputs showed that harvest levels associated with the interim agreement led to a 17% reduction in Region 2 spawning biomass and O32 abundance over the long term. If 2C is the only IPHC regulatory area in Region 2 with a TCY based on survey abundance, it suffers from the reduced abundance caused by the interim agreement, in addition to the direct yearly TCY reductions to comply with the interim agreement. This causes the 2C reference TCY to be lower than it would otherwise be in the absence of the current interim agreement. E, that 2C has the most individual commercial fishermen and charter operators of any IPHC regulatory area. Socioeconomic considerations led to additional TCY being distributed to 2C from other areas other Alaska areas to offset these socioeconomic impacts. At 5.2.4, IPHC regulatory area 3A, the CB noted in the following from IPHC regulatory area 3A conference board members. A, stocks in 3A are healthy and the stock center is starting to shift back to this region. The interim agreement creates an unsupportable and unsustainable situation for the Alaska areas. Support for additional control rules, but only as part of a comprehensive management procedure which is consistent across areas. In the absence of such a policy, Alaska stakeholders are left with a willy-nilly approach that leads to tensions and inconsistencies. That support for this motion is a compromise that is necessary because some areas have a defined control rule that destabilizes the other areas. The next three, E, F, and G here apply to actually to 3 areas. They were put under 3A. We've noted that after each of them, but as I read, just so you're aware, they apply to areas 3A, 3B, and 4A. At E, importance and desire for long-term process for setting catch limits. That A is science-based, B, agreed upon by both parties, C, eliminates or significantly reduces the annual haggling process over catch limits, D, essentially codifies what commission adjustments from science-based reference levels are allowed and the acceptable size or magnitude of those adjustments. F, any adjustment to reference levels made by the commission should be of predetermined nature and limited in scale. Those adjustments should be incorporated in MSE, see peer review document. Ad hoc changes should be eliminated or substantially reduced, and the process should be across years and areas. It should be consistent across years and areas. And finally, and this is more broadly applicable from the stakeholders' perspective or from the Conference Board US side perspective, there was a request for a paper that would bring together all the information into one place to impacts of higher harvest levels in one biological region on other biological regions, noting that that would be helpful moving forward. For example, for the last 4 years, Area 2 has had higher harvest levels relative to biological or surveyed distribution. It is not clear what the impact is within Area 2, for example, the impact of 2A on 2C, or what the impact is on the other areas. We understand this issue was discussed at the MSAB, but it would be very helpful to have it compiled in one document for those of us who are not part of the MSAB process. While our example is backward-looking, we think this information will help us going forward as we hopefully develop a longer-term process. Again, more broadly applied across areas from those stakeholders' perspective. IPHC Regulatory Area 3B, USA, the Conference Board, this is at 28, the Conference Board noted the following from IPHC Regulatory Area 3B Conference Board members. A, 2021 survey results that increasing amount of Pacific halibut are in Area 3B. The partial survey in 2020 is crucial to informing our perspective and trust in such a big gain or increase. Had a complete survey shown a 15 to 25% increase in 2020, the results of 2021 would have established a trend versus an outlier or potentially anomalistic event in the historical trends. At B, improving catches in 3B over the last 5 years, or note the improving catches in 3B over the last 5 years and efficient harvests of both large and small Pacific halibut, depending on habitat selected. That's relative to slide 20 of IPHC 2022 AM098-10 shows that the 2012 year class is 19% mature, and Dr. Stewart has noted the 2012 year class is still highly mobile, and the 2021 distribution may not reflect where these fish settle long term. That the harvest rate of 0.75 acts as a precautionary buffer. That IPHC Regulatory Area 3B reference TCY represents a 90% increase over the 2021 TCY. Many factors can make 1 year's worth of data, of survey data, over or underestimate abundance in an IPHC regulatory area. IPHC policy has been to moderate increases until multiple years of data show a substantive trend. Upper limits of 15% on annual changes have been discussed at the MSAB. The IPHC's previous slow up, fast down rule limited increases to 1/3 of survey-based abundance increases. Then there's some other points more recently added that 3B FIS model weight per unit effort of 0.32 over the last 5 years has increased by 88%. That 3B 2021 FIS 0.32 is up by 57%. I think this one about the incomplete survey was stated above, at I 2021-3B estimates 18.8% of the O32 stock distribution in this area. The TCUY recommendation of 4.06 equates to 9.9% of the coastwide TCUY of 41.22. Moving on to 5.26, IPHC Regulatory Area 4A USA. At 29, paragraph 29, the CB noted the following from IPHC Regulatory Area 4A. Support for TCUY reference level and 4A catch rates consistent with prior years. 5.27, IPHC Regulatory Area 4B USA 30, paragraph 30, the CB noted the following line from IPHC Regulatory Area 4B. Support O32-based distribution and harvest policy that is consistent across all areas. At B, stability is important to all areas, but particularly in remote 4B communities. The 15% increase reflects moderate approach given the 30% increase in the reference TCUY. And D, the commissioners should recognize Alaska areas are making painful compromises to address socioeconomic impacts. 5.2.8, IPHC Regulatory Area 4C-D&E, USA. The CB noted the following from IPHC Regulatory Area 4C-D&E Conference Board members. A, area stakeholders have worked hard to successfully reduce trawl bycatch in their area, which benefits the resource coast-wide. B, current bycatch removals use 3-year average that includes high 2019 levels. C, many survey stations were missed in 2021, which means they may have missed the small fish. Setting TCUY at 3.81 million pounds sets the FCUY above 1.67 and allows the area catch sharing plan to provide opportunity to Area 4E stakeholders, which benefits rural and mostly indigenous communities. E, reference level TCUY for Area 4C-D&E created unsupportable socioeconomic impacts. That stakeholders there appreciate the support from other Alaska areas and recognize that that support comes at a cost. 5.3, the TCUY recommendations. The conference board members from the USA recommended the following 2022 TCUYs for Alaska. IPHC regulatory areas based on the SBR 43, resulting in a coastwide TCUY of 41.22 million pounds. Those are in Table 1. FCUYs for IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A include an adjustment for unguided anglers estimates using a midpoint between ADF and G high and low values, where the reference mortality table uses high values. An increase to IPHC regulatory areas 2C, 3A, and 4C-D&E from the reference TCUY is offset by reducing increases to IPHC regulatory areas 3B and 4B relative to the reference levels released by the Secretariat. I read through the numbers. For 2C, the mortality limit recommended at 5.49, for 3A at 14.87, 3B 4.06, 4A 2.18, 4B 1.6, 4C-D&E 3.81, for a total IPHC convention area of 41.22. So Canada's vote in favor is 13, 7 against, and 1 abstention. USA in favor 33, against 0, and 1 abstention. One more, paragraph 33, the CB members from the USA noted the following perspectives from IPHC Regulatory Area 3A members. USCB members noted support for all areas being at or close to the reference levels provided by the IPHC Secretariat, and that the recommended 2022 Alaska TCUYs are a major compromise between all Alaska areas. Moving to 6, IPHC fishery regulation proposals for the 2022 process, I think it should say. IPHC Secretary fishery regulation proposals to start with. At 34, the CB noted Fishery Regulations Proposal IPHC 2022 AM098 Proposal A1, which provides the mortality and fishery limit framework for the population at AM098. Not sure there isn't something missing there. At 35, the CB recommended that the Commission adopt Proposal A1 with addition of the mortality limits for each contracting party by sector as detailed in Section 5.3, but also include all mortality, e.g. subsistence, bycatch, and non-guided sport in the annual summary framework table. There was a discussion about it being difficult at times to find the breakout for subsistence non-guided sport. Hence the request. Canada and US both unanimous on that recommendation. At 6.12, IPHC Fishery Regulations, Commercial Fishing Period, the CB noted and recommended that the Commission adopt Fishery Regulation Proposal A2, which specified fishing periods for the commercial Pacific halibut fisheries. See Section 4 for a summary of the discussion and recommendations. Canada was unanimous, US as well. Now moving to 6.13, IPHC Fishery Regulations, minor amendments. The CB noted Fishery Regulation Proposals, Prop A3, which proposed amendments to ensure clarity and consistency in the IPHC Fishery Regulations, recommended that Commission adopt these as written relative to Prop 8.3. The contracting party fishery regulations proposals, 6.21, recreational sport fishing for Pacific halibut, IPHC regulatory areas 2C, 3A, let's just say all areas in Alaska, record keeping for charter Pacific halibut annual limits. The CB recommended the Commission well, I better read the whole thing. Rev 1, which proposed establishing backing up to 39. The Conference Board noted fishery regulation proposals for Prop B1, Rev 1, which proposed establishing record-keeping requirements needed to enforce Pacific halibut annual limits for recreational sport fishing for halibut in convention waters in and off Alaska. The Conference Board recommended the Commission adopt this proposal, B1, with Canada in favor 5, 0 against, 1 abstaining, USA in favor 30, against 0, and 2 abstentions. Moving to 6.2.2, IPHC Fishery Regulations, the Charter Management Measures in IPHC Regulatory Areas 2C and 3A. The Commission noted Fishery Regulation Proposal Prop B2, which proposed IPHC regulation changes for the Charter recreational Pacific halibut fisheries in IPHC Areas 2C and 3A to achieve the Charter Pacific halibut allocation under the North Pacific Fishery Management Council Pacific Halibut Capturing Plan. The Conference Board recommended the Commission adopt Proposal B2. Conference Board members noted the hard work by halibut, I skipped the vote, but I'll come back, by the Halibut Charter Management Committee and the ADF&G staff to arrive at complex management measures designed to maintain as much access as possible at these low levels of abundance and to support viable charter businesses. And that passed. Canada in favor 3, against 0 with 16 abstaining. USA in favor 28, 0 against, and 2 abstaining. Going to 6.2.3, IPHC Fishery Regulations, Fishing Gear, Trap Gear Use in IPHC Regulatory Area 2B. The Conference Board noted Fishery Regulation Proposal Prop B3, which proposed IPHC regulation changes to allow trap gear use on directed commercial fishing trips and Regulatory Area 2B. The Conference Board recommended that the Commission adopt Proposal B3 as written and included in Appendix 1. Canada unanimous, USA unanimous. By way of capturing the discussion and rationale, the Conference Board noted this change would establish equity with IPHC regulations with respect to U.S. pot gear and may minimize bycatch and reduce whale depredation. IPHC fishery regulations, recreational sport fishing for Pacific halibut, and IPHC regulatory area 2B relative to the daily bag limit. The Commission noted fishery regulation proposal Prop B4, which proposed IPHC regulation changes to allow a daily bag limit of 3 fish per person in IPHC regulatory area 2B. At 48, Canada CB members noted that Canada does not distinguish between lodges, guides, or, for lack of a better description, general unguided fishers. It is one fishery with the same rules, fishing the same finite quota. The ability to adjust the 2B recreational fishery daily limits to 3 daily is critical, as we do strive to forecast and design our fishery in a very conservative manner to start the season and attempt to design a fishery that leaves a buffer in case it is needed to remain under the allocation, I think is the implication. Number 49, Canada's Conference Board members also noted it uses a hybrid model of size limits and bag limits, but under Canadian regulations, size limits cannot be adjusted in season, but bag limits can. Canada also noticed each recreational angler has an annual limit of 10 fish. There's an overage provision policy in place, the only regulatory area to have this mechanism for the recreational fishery. The overage provision provides the Department of Fisheries the process to reduce the recreational TAC for the following year by the amount of the overage from the previous year. This creates a powerful incentive for the fishery to stay within its allocation. At 50, USA Conference Board members expressed concern and opposition that 3 fish limit would allow an unfair marketing advantage for the charter sector, may result in allocation overages, identifying concern that insufficient information was available to determine the impacts, and allowed the recreational sector to take an allocation that many in the US side considered disproportionately large as a result of the interim agreement. At 51, U.S. Conference Board members noted concern over the limited analysis on the impact of a 3 fish bag limit to angler behavior under normal or non-pandemic conditions. 52, the Conference Board considered an amendment to the IPHC Prop B4 limiting the implementation of a 3 fish bag limit until after September 01. That was offered as an amendment to try and find a compromise. That passed on the Canadian side with 20 in favor and 0 against, 0 abstaining. On the US side, we had 10 in favor, 16 against, and 5 abstaining. So passed in Canada, did not pass in the USA. At 53, the Conference Board considered B4. So that was the amendment, and then moving to a vote. The amendment failed, moving to the vote on the unamended original proposal for the 3 fish limit without the September 1 date. The vote was Canada in favor 19, against 0, with 0 abstaining. USA in favor 4, against 27, and 4 abstaining. So again, passed on the main motion on the Canadian by the Canadian delegation at the Conference Board, but failed on the US side. 6.3, other stakeholder fishery regulation proposals on the recreational sport fishing for Pacific halibut relative to the proposal for processing Pacific halibut for eating and/or preservation. 54, the Conference Board noted fishery regulation proposal C1, which proposed an exception to allow recreational fishermen on pleasure craft in Alaska regulatory areas to process Pacific halibut for eating and/or preservation, subject to measures to facilitate enforcement of the applicable daily bag limits. 55, the CB noted that there are incorrect statements in Prop C1 regarding the reference to, to regulations in regulatory area 2C. Hopefully those were captured to help correct those statements. At 56, the CB recommended no action be taken at this time by the Commission on IPHC Prop C1, but that additional work be done to engage enforcement from both contracting parties, address deficiencies in the proposal, and to have the proposal come back for consideration at the interim meeting. Conference board members were primarily interested in finding an enforceable regulation change that would allow consumption on board of a reasonable amount of Pacific halibut. That passed unanimous by both countries. Missing page numbers. Apologize for the, make sure I don't miss pages. Okay, conference board recommended that the commission ask the domestic management agencies to look at the issue addressed in, this was a stakeholder comment info 01 that was in appendix 2, and come back with additional information for further consideration. That information should include a definition of rental boat and impacts of increasing harvest in the unguided rental boat sector. Concern was expressed that this sector is unlimited and growing. Other U.S. Conference Board members noted that the North Pacific Council has considered this issue and failed to clearly define the problem or potential solutions. The motion on that recommendation in Canada was in favor 0, against 0, abstain 18, and U.S. in favor 16, against 9, with 3 abstaining. Moving to number 7, incidental catch or bycatch. The conference board received an update from NOAA representative Ms. Alicia Miller on North Pacific Fishery Management Council actions to reduce Bering Sea Pacific halibut bycatch in the flatfish and Pacific cod targets. Ms. Miller provided an estimate of the implementation timeline for council-approved actions and reported to the conference board on the Observer EM program improvements. The conference board, U.S. Conference Board noted, Alaska's governor recently established a bycatch task force to elevate the importance of addressing bycatch. Canada Conference Board members noted they were pleased to hear about the abundance-based management measures that have been developed by the North Pacific Council for the AM098 fleet in the Bering Sea Aleutian Islands, and the measures being considered for the Pacific trawl cod fishery in this area. They look forward to hearing more about the effectiveness of these measures at future meetings. However, there remain concerns about monitoring of the non-directed fisheries, particularly Gulf of Alaska trawl fisheries. As noted in IPHC 2022 AM098 06 Rev 1, the partial coverage leads to increased uncertainty in these non-directed commercial discard mortality estimates and to the potential for bias. Canada Conference Board members noted this concern was also expressed at a MPFMC IPHC workshop on Pacific halibut bycatch estimation back in April 2012, where it was noted, quote, the estimation of total halibut bycatch mortality in the Gulf of Alaska therefore rests on the assumption that observation on observed vessels are representative of fishing activities and halibut bycatch estimates for unobserved vessels. There is ample evidence and analysis to deny the validity of this assumption. The biases in observer deployment and behavioral modifications noted above make it impossible to estimate the magnitude of bias embedded in current estimation procedures. End quote. Again, that's from April 2012 document. It was further noted, quote, that it is impossible to quantify the observer effect since it's not consistent from tip to tip, and that bootstrapping would just assess whether the estimator is biased, not quantify the observer bias. At 62, Canada Conference Board members noted that, based on comments from the USA, the reduction in bycatch reported in the Gulf of Alaska in recent years may be more a result of reduced trawl fisheries for certain species, may not necessarily be attributed to new monitoring or management measures. We appreciate hearing about some of the actions being undertaken or considered by the U.S. to try to address bycatch issues. We look forward to learning more about them, but remain concerned over the non-directed mortalities in the Gulf of Alaska, particularly by the trawl fisheries. U.S. Board Conference members noted that the Alaska Observer Program undergoes an annual scientific review process where statistical reliability is explicitly evaluated. In 2022, the Gulf of Alaska trawl coverage is 30%, and Bering Sea trawl coverage is at least 100% and in some fisheries is 200%. At 8, other business, longer-term distribution of the TCUI. The Canada CB members noted the following considerations for distributing mortality limits. A, start an early initiation of negotiations by the contracting parties to develop a new agreement for distributing the coastwide mortality limits, recognizing the current agreement is set to expire at the end of the 2022 season. B, primary goals for a future agreement for distributing the coastwide TCEY should include the coastwide mortality limit and regulatory area mortality limits must be informed by science advice. The coastwide mortality limit is shared fairly between the contracting parties through national shares that take into account factors such as history of fishing and socioeconomic considerations. Little I3, mortality limits must include all sources and sizes of mortality, U26 and O26, within each regulatory area. The contracting parties be directly responsible for all their fishing mortalities and the uncertainty associated with the accuracy and precision of their estimated fishing mortalities in their area. At little 5, all removals from both directed and non-directed fisheries be monitored to defined minimum standards of accuracy and precision. 6, actions in one contracting party's area that result in negative impacts on the available harvest to the other contracting party's area be mitigated. And at C, a multi-year agreement be adopted to provide longer-term stability. The Canada Conference Board members also noted that halibut are a highly migratory species that migrate throughout their whole lives, even as adults. IPHC Secretariat have even said that within the year, halibut can move throughout a region. The IPHC Secretariat have also stated that there is no biological basis for the IPHC regulatory areas, and that is why results should be considered at the regional level. These need to be kept in mind when considering distribution just on abundance indices. Also, the MSC work plan has been finalized for 2021 through 23, and that additional direction from the commissioners on distribution and any new or revised objectives is needed before we can move forward. At 66, the U.S. Conference Board members noted the following regarding Canada Conference Board, the statements above. They are in agreement with point 1 from the Canadian Conference Board statements above. At B, Canada's position never mentions abundance, while the U.S. focuses on abundance as measured by the FIS or a 3-year average of the FIS as fundamental to distribution or apportionment. This is the gap that must be bridged to find agreement. C, U26 and O26 are fully accounted for in the TCUI process. D, uncertainty would suggest a lower harvest, not more, to either contracting party. And E, developing standards for monitoring is a secondary issue, and the US CB delegation questioned how or who would develop these standards. Okay, and then the following is the USA Conference Board members, what they noted relative to a long-term distribution policy between the contracting parties at this meeting. A, consider both science-based indices such as the FIS, stock assessment, and explicit policy considerations. B, generally reflect the abundance of halibut within each contracting party's waters. C, ensure that one contracting party's apportionment does not result in negative impacts to the halibut resource in the other contracting party's waters, i.e., that harvest by one contracting party beyond the yield found in that contracting party's waters does not negatively impact the halibut resource within the other contracting party's waters. Sorry, that's a little redundant. At D, consider smoothing elements at the coastwide scale to minimize SPR variability due to uncertainty in recruitment estimates. For example, a 15% maximum TCY annual change or application of the slow up, fast down policy. E, consider smoothing elements at the regulatory area scale to minimize variability in survey abundance indexes. For example, a three-year rolling average or slow up, fast down. At 68, the U.S. Conference Board members further noted that the long-term distribution policy within U.S. waters should A, be comprised of science-based indices while allowing a limited range of explicit policy choices addressing socioeconomic factors to provide some level of predictability and stability in the U.S. TC-wide distribution process. This will reduce the need for large-scale ad hoc decisions within the distribution procedure. Long term, the effect of these policy choices should be evaluating using the MSC framework. Be developed in a transparent process with input from stakeholders. At 69, the Conference Board expressed its appreciation, big time, for the assistance provided by the IPHC Secretariat for the in-session presentations and support for Dr. Stewart, Dr. Hicks, Dr. Huchnenczak, and the help of Dr. Colin Jones, Mr. Ed Henry, who did amazing jobs of keeping up with edits on screen, Miss Rachel Rolera, Miss Lori Sidoris, and all the other Secretariat support behind the scenes that we might have missed. And I think I can, no, we did review these minutes. Clearly we have a few things to clean up, but they were adopted earlier today, but with Canada in favor 9, in favor 9, against 0, abstain 0, and the USA in favor 17, against 0, with 1 abstention. Okay, thank you. Sorry, that was quite lengthy. I should turn next to Jim and see if he has anything to add that I might have muddled through.
No, you did a great job. I know it was a lot of reading, although Dr. Wilson did send us the now updated, not the updated, but just the cleaned up report has been sent to us as well. While you were out reading the harder one.
Well, I apologize for stumbling, but happy to answer any questions or to do my best to answer any questions.
A lot of detail there.
Interested in the part of the report. I didn't take note of the clause, but there was a point at which bycatch was the topic, and I think there was sort of a U.S. Conference Board perspective that you relayed, and I wanted to sort of verify what I took away from that. It seemed to me to be a different message than what we have heard from U.S. Conference Board members in the past, and that you know, maybe it's sort of like enough progress has been made, and you know, this issue's been addressed. I'm obviously paraphrasing. That's not what you said, but it was sort of the way I understood it, and I wondered if you would be willing to expand a little on whether the perspectives of U.S. Conference Board members are changing with respect to concerns or questions or uncertainties about how fisheries that encounter bycatch, halibut as bycatch, are managed and monitored.
Thank you through the chair, Commissioner Davis. I'd be happy to try and speak to that. I think the conversation or the presentation from the US side of the Conference Board was that there has been really significant progress made on bycatch. We've really focused on the area where the bulk of the bycatch is taking place in the Bering Sea. There were two very significant actions taken to reduce bycatch. Those are forthcoming in terms of implementation. Even short of that, there's been very significant reductions in bycatch in recent years. There have been improvements to the observer program. There's increased use and testing of electronic monitoring in an expanding number of fisheries in the Gulf of Alaska, and namely in the pelagic trawl fishery, to free up additional observers to be deployed on other boats. So I would say that while observer programs can always be improved, bycatch can always be reduced, there is a lot of pride from the U.S. delegation and satisfaction over the progress that has been made in recent years and in this year in particular. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a request to provide links, and those were provided to much more updated reports, noting and an explanation actually of the changes that have been made in the observer program since 2012, including, as I said, expansion in EM. I think we're hoping that well, there was a request to hold a workshop where we shared information on how both sides were monitoring their fisheries as a way to update US and Canadians on how those monitoring programs are carried out. But certainly, yes, I think it was noted that that's fairly old data, and the links were provided to updated information.
Through the chair, if I can make a comment as well.
Please go
So
ahead.
the other part of that is it's still, it's still very difficult to, when you have partial observer coverage, and I think the reference that the amount that was put forward was 30% in the Gulf. It's still hard to get what the observer effect is, and so that's kind of one of the main points there. And so having, well, yes, although it was from 2012, all right, has been some improvements, but the question is, how much have these improvements gone to addressing the underlying uncertainty that was identified in 2012? And so I think that's kind of where they're trying to get at. Okay, there's been improvements. Okay, what's the scale of those improvements been? And so having some sort of process where we could share that information, I think would be good.
On a lot of issues. I really appreciate the work that the conference board put into going through some very complex
Yeah, thank you. I just big shout out to the members of the conference board for their hard work, and also just to the conference board process. There's a lot of learning that goes on, and hopefully provides meaningful input for your process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise for myself.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. So under agenda item 10, we'll revisit the various proposals. Thank you.
Okay, and before we break, if I may, just so folks are aware, I think what the intent was to walk through proposals A1, 2, and 3, walk through the proposals B1, B2, B3, and then we would circle back as well to proposal B4 and C1, and may have a somewhat different treatment of those two proposals. But we will reconvene in, should we say 10 minutes? So that would be 16:10, 4:10 Pacific time.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we are now revisiting agenda item 10, which are the fishery regulation proposals for 2022. And as you pointed out just before, we're going to step through A1 through A3. And Dr. Hutchinson from the Secretariat will lead those. And then we'll pass to the US to go through B1 and B2, Canada B4 and B3, depending on which order they go in. And also we have a stakeholder on hold ready to present C1. So to start, I'll pass to Dr. Hutchinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. As noted on Tuesday, we have today 8 proposals on the table for the Commission. And I'll start with presenting proposal A1. As you might note here, this is a revised version of proposal A1 that made changes to the second part of the second table of the that specifies TCUIs according to the domestic cat sharing arrangements, noting that the table should be stating instead of catch, landings, and discard mortality. Overall, this proposal is a framework for mortality and fishery limits within the IPHC fishery regulations, section 5, and it is a way how the mortality limits are brought into the regulations. For now, we would like to ask you to adopt just this framework, not actual mortality limits. These will be decided by the Commission and deliberated by the Commission tomorrow. Thank you. Over to you, Chair. Great, thank you. And we can move then to proposal A2. Proposal A2 specifies periods for the direct commercial fishing within the IPHC fishery regulations. The Secretariat proposes here that the commercial fishing periods for all IPHC regulatory areas to be set again by the Commission either later today or tomorrow. This is again just a framework, and I will bring here the exact appendix, which states how the fishing periods are stated within the regulations. Over to you, Chair.
I'll turn to other commissioners. Commissioner Albertson.
So, Chair, is this action just for the format, or are you looking actually for dates?
My understanding at this time is that we could adopt specific dates.
So if that's the case, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Currently in the text, not shown as modified, the same season dates that were recommended by the Pacific Council. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that is correct. According, we reviewed the recommendations from the Pacific Fisheries Council and determined that these imply no changes to the section 9.4 of the regulations. Therefore, there are no proposed changes here. Thank you.
Covered in paragraph 9(2), and then a season that would be covered in paragraph 9.
So, Mr. Chair, I wasn't able to print off the conference board minutes, but I would move the opening date proposed by the conference board, and which I think was, I don't remember, it was March, was that also March 6th? I can't remember. And a closing date of December 7th, which was last year's date.
Thank you. There a second to the motion?
I would second that, Glenn.
Paul? Is there, Dr. Wilson or Dr. Hutchinson, do we typically vote at this point, or do we note objection at this point? What's our procedure that we typically follow here?
Thank you, Chair. If this decision is unanimous, we can just move forward and accept the dates within this proposal and have this included in the final text of the regulation.
Okay, thank you for that. So as I understand it, then I will ask whether or not there's any objection to the proposal that our season open date would be 1200 local time on 6 March, and that fisheries would close at 1200 local time on 7 December. Not seeing any objection, that would be adopted. And I believe we can move to the next proposal unless there's something else we're missing on this.
Thank you, Chair. I believe we can move to proposal A3 that is now on the screen. This proposal has to do with clarity and consistency of the fishery IPHC fishery regulations. I will note here that this has been prepared in collaboration with contracting parties to make sure both contracting parties agree with those minor clarifications of the in the regulations. These changes would be as follows. There's a consistency now in the use of definition of authorized representative of the Commission. The definitions now include that new definition of the authorized representative of the Commission. Further changes, again, this is they use that definition consistently throughout the whole text of the regulations. And this definition appears in section 8 and again in section 11. And then again in section 16. And there were also minor edits throughout the IPHC fishery regulations for stylistic consistency among sections. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that update. And just to note, at least from the US side, and I believe this is also true for Canada, we've had an opportunity to work closely with Secretary these minor amendments prior to this meeting. I will turn to you, Paul, to see if there's anything else, other issues or
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we can now move to the proposal B. I will just note that this is a proposal that was resubmitted as a revision 1 by the representatives of NOAA Fisheries. And I believe we have NOAA Fisheries representatives who are available to speak to this proposal in more details if you wish to ask additional questions. Thank you.
that was submitted in October, but maybe just a quick review for the commissioners so that they're aware of the proposal.
Yes. So the proposal 1 is related to record keeping for charter halibut annual limits in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A. And here I can bring the details of the proposed amendment to the text in the Appendix 1, Section 29. This introduces additional sub point to point 1H that is introducing this additional record keeping rule regulations, and I believe Doug Duncan can answer additional questions to this proposal. Thank you.
Hello, commissioners. Do you hear me? This is Doug Duncan, staff with National Marine Fisheries Service, Alaska region.
We hear you, Doug. Please go ahead.
Sure. I guess I think Basha covered most of it pretty well, but I'll just give a real concise summary. Like she said, this is record keeping and requirements for charter vessel anglers in areas 2C and 3A. This proposal is pretty much identical to what was submitted and reviewed at the interim meeting. It has one clarification to better clarify that this is specific to charter vessel anglers. And essentially what it does is when there is an annual limit in place for charter vessel anglers in area 2C and 3A, it requires that they maintain a harvest record card. So recording each halibut that they catch against the annual limit that's in place. This itself does not put the harvest record requirement in place. That is going to be the next, or would be through the charter halibut management measures. This outlines the requirements in which provides an administrative streamlining. So instead of having to add the kind of the requirements and specifications for the harvest record card in each year when there is that, and then also remove them in each year when they're not a management measure, this puts them in the general regulations. The second part of it is it authorizes an electronic harvest record consistent with the approach that Alaska Department of Fish and Game is starting to use in its other state-managed fisheries, most notably salmon. But also maintains the ability to use a paper harvest record card consistent with the regulations that have been adopted before when an annual limit is in place. So with that, I will stop and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duncan, for that overview. Mr. DeGrief.
Thank you very much for that question. Through the chair, Commissioner DeGrief, there is, as you will see in the next regulatory proposal, an annual limit is being contemplated for Area 2C. However, whether it is selected depends on the final TCEY selected by the Commission. And I assume your question was specific to halibut, but I will confirm that with you.
Yeah, no, it was specific to halibut. Thank you very much for that clarity.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Can we have, please, the proposal B2 on the screen now? And moving to about B2. Moving to proposal B2, this proposes a framework or a mechanism for setting management measures for Charter Pacific halibut fisheries in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A for application 2022. And these are developed in order to achieve the Charter Pacific halibut allocation under the NPFMC North Pacific Management Council halibut catch sharing plan. So moving to again to the appendix to provide specific wording that is proposed. Here we have specific suggested regulatory language, and note that some of this text is coming with additional details on that might be changing depending on the final TCOI that is adopted by the Commission. Thank you.
I believe under A1, this is a framework proposal that will be modified depending upon the specific TCEY that is ultimately selected by the Commission. Are there any questions or comments on this proposal? Commissioner Davis.
Sort of pre-pandemic measures, our understanding was there had been annual limits introduced. So was interested to get a bit more information about why those aren't being considered, if our understanding is correct in that regard, and if so, why?
This is Doug Duncan from National Marine Fisheries Service again. I would be happy to take a shot at answering that question. So when to recap the process, these recommendations are submitted by the North Pacific Council, or yes, come from the North Pacific Council's Charter Halibut Management Committee, and they make their recommendations for management measures based on a extensive analysis provided by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And for this year, yes, under the range of expected charter allocations for 3A, the management measures to constrain the harvest within those did not necessitate an annual limit, or alternatively, it was not where the Charter Halibut Committee wanted to make those reductions in expected harvest. So that's maybe a short answer, and if there's any, kind of a deeper methodological question, I know that we have Sarah Webster from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, who conducts the analysis, available to answer, to delve into that if desired.
Regulatory proposals for Area 2B as they relate to bag limits for recreational fisheries. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. I guess I might just add one more comment about the process with the Commissioner's indulgence. So yeah, those you characterized it perfectly well, and I think one of the important elements of the Charter Halibut Management Committee process is that they can. One of the important parts of that is that they choose the management measures that achieve that allocation, but are also least disruptive to the business models that they have in place. So, we're working to balance that, and if two things lead to the same expected outcome, then they can choose the one which is they consider least disruptive.
Okay, so you would take into account anytime you have an overage and then modify your management style or rules to
Correct. So within the model that we incorporate the information that we receive, and so if the fleet
through the chair, just one last, but you're not trying to account for that overage with these management tools the next year. You're just trying to better refine the management tools to achieve your full TAC.
That's correct. We're with well. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Ryle. So one of the things that we're currently in the process of undertaking is a regular review of our various allocation regulations, policies, and currently that will be something that is an ongoing point of review and discussion at the North Pacific Fishery Management Council coming up over this year.
All right, thanks, Glenn.
Are there additional questions or comments on the proposal? Not seeing any. I would entertain a motion to adopt the framework proposal with the note, as we've had earlier, that this would be populated or filled in, modified.
I would move to adopt. This is Bob Alverson.
From Canada, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you, Paul. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection? Seeing none, framework was adopted. I believe that takes us to proposal B3.
Thank you, Chair. Moving to proposal B3. Here in this proposal, Canada is proposing changes to Section 18 of the IPHC fishery regulations related to fishing gear and would like to allow trap gear use on directed commercial fishing trips in IPHC regulatory area 2B. this regulation is introducing kind of parity that allows the DFO authorize the trap gear use similar as it's awarded for the similar gear use by NIMS as written here in the suggested regulatory language. So here we have that proposed change, and I believe we have Maureen Finn, who is available to speak to this proposal in more detail.
I'll turn to other commissioners to see if there are any questions. If I may briefly, just in terms of the structure of this proposal, is it currently the policy or the authorization of DFO to allow the retention of halibut using trap gear, or is that something that's contemplated in the future? And I guess I'd be interested to know if it does currently occur, how commonly it occurs, or what kind of data we may have on retention with vessels using trap gear.
Good question, and I believe Maureen can answer to that if you would entertain her comments here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Dan, thank you.
Oh, great. So the way this is worded is essentially to allow DFO the flexibility to be able to allow trap gear should we choose to do so. It doesn't automate that trap gear would be allowed within our domestic fishery.
Thank you for that. And if I may, then, is that something that is actively under consideration, or is this really more of sort of a placeholder proposal if this comes up at some point in the future?
It's been, thank you. It's been briefly discussed, but the impetus here is there's a couple of stakeholders or our skippers here in Canada that are interested in testing the effectiveness of POTS, or trap gear as we call it in Canada, to reduce depredation and bycatch in the directed commercial halibut fishery. Under IPHC regulations, trap gear is currently allowed, or halibut is allowed to be retained in trap gear in the sablefish fishery, but this is really to give us the flexibility to test it at a fairly small scale within the directed commercial halibut fishery.
So I'd just like to let the Canadians know that the U.S. will likely change some definitions on the pot design, particularly for what we call slanky gear, to allow for better use of halibut in blackcod fishing to reduce depredation on halibut. And we should probably next year try to share the information we get with you, your success and any hopefully success we have in trap designs. So those are my comments, Glenn.
Thanks, Bob. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to adopt this proposal?
I would make that motion to it.
I'll second.
Go ahead, Neil.
All right, seeing none, that proposal has passed. I believe now that takes us to
Thank you, Chair. Moving to B4. here we have it now on the screen. In proposal B4, Canada is proposing changes to section 28 of the IPHC fishery regulations, which are the sections related to recreational sport fishing for Pacific halibut in IPHC regulatory area 2B. And here Canada is proposing to allow daily bag limit of 3 fish per person in this proposal. And the specific wording is available here in the Appendix 1, point 1C. And I believe Maureen would be also available to provide additional details. Noting that, I'll just note that there was additional change discussed, that there is no need at the end of the sentence with C to have the subscripts with the notes 6 and 7, because this is already included in the main point, the subsection 1 of this regulatory proposal change. Thank you.
Thank you. And perhaps a quick overview of this proposal by Ms. Vin.
Sure. I know there's, well, thank you. And sure, I'm happy to do that. I know there's been a lot of discussion around this one, so I'll try to just wrap it up here and be quick. But so at the IPHC special session 10, I believe it was February of last year, the Commission previously supported and approved an increase to the Canadian daily bag limit from 2 per day to 3 per day, but that was on a kind of conditional 1-year basis. So the purpose of this proposal is essentially to remove the expiry dates for that 3 per day provision and to make this 3 per day ceiling the kind of the new maximum or potential maximum daily limit for BC. And I guess a lot of the confusion exists around that. So just to be clear, it's important to understand that this 3 per day is a potential maximum. It's not the new default implemented limit. So DFO still sets daily limits in season and can and does proactively vary these limits in line with regulations and kind of timely in-season catch estimates. So the impetus for this is that the default IPHC daily bag limit of 2 fish per day does constrain Canada's flexibility to make those critical in-season changes to our fishing plan to support meeting our TAC goals and domestic fishery objectives. And also, would like to highlight that adopting this new sort of 3 per day does align IPHC fishery regulations with Canada's domestic sport fishing regulations that also maximize daily and possession limits at 3 per day. So it therefore would simplify kind of unnecessary regulatory complexity and confusion. But in essence, this proposal is really about providing DFO management flexibility, and again, doesn't mean that the new default limit is 3 per day. And it would provide Canada another tool that would, permit us greater flexibility and autonomy to manage our fisheries. So, and I think as Commissioner de Grief mentioned earlier, it is also worth mentioning that the Canadian recreational fishery does have a domestic overage policy in place. So in the rare occurrence that any overage did occur, this would be domestically deducted from the preceding year's available TAC. And I do believe it is the only recreational fishery amongst the regulatory areas to have that. So that's a brief summary. I'm happy to answer questions about it if people would like.
And so right off the top, there seems to be like a marketing advantage, which may or may not be the case, but with not being educated to knowing the differences, that is, a concern. And really, our fisheries are different in many ways. We do split our fishery into guided and unguided, and the unguided harvest is taken off the top, which affects both the charter and the commercial fishery. And right now, the unguided sector can take 2 fish of any size, and their allocation is not prescribed. And so having the opportunity to equal the regulations between countries, they might have 3 fish of any size, which might present an issue for industry. So we just need more time to really understand, and for our stakeholders to be engaged in understanding how Canada would keep themselves within allocation, having a 3 fish, and as written, the potential of having 3 fish of any size. And so I'm reluctant to kind of, for me to weigh in on this at this time, and would like to have some opportunity to maybe have U.S. stakeholders involved in the discussion a little bit more, and before we make a decision on this. That's my comments.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. And Richard, thank you for your comments and suggestion about some ideas about maybe some more time to consider this. I think just building on some of the comments that Maureen went through when she was providing some background on this proposal. I think, as she indicated, this is a maximum or up to 3 per day. In many ways, the U.S. and Canadian fisheries have a lot of similarities, but there are also, I would say, some significant differences. But we have a lot of similarities in the process that we come up with for how we make decisions around the management tools that we have at hand for the various fisheries. I think there are some key differences, though, in Canada with the fishery, and Maureen talked about a couple of them. First off, in Canada, there is an explicit TAC for the recreational fishery. She spoke about that there's also an overage provision, which means that in the next year there would be a reduction if the catch did go over the recreational TAC. And I think the other really key thing is that we have a very responsive and comprehensive in-season monitoring and management of the fishery, where we tally up as we go through the season of where we expect the catch to be. We do that in conjunction with our Sport Fishing Advisory Board, meaning that we gather the data, we confer with the Sport Fishing Advisory Board. And, if we're getting close to where we think we're going to run into issues, we clearly have some discussions around we might have to close the fishery. On the flip side of that, if the catch is going slower than one anticipated, we would like to increase our capabilities and tools to provide some more opportunity for fishers to have the ability to harvest that catch. At the start of the year, and this will happen, I would say, within a matter of weeks, the department will be meeting with the Sport Fishing Advisory Board to set what they would like to see based upon the outcome of this meeting for what's available to harvest and what their share is, and set those, in working in conjunction with the department, set those management points, whether it be the size limit that's in place for the year. And so I think, to me, there are some differences in how both parties respond to managing the fishery. And to me, this one here is a critical tool that we would like to add the flexibility to add up to 3 per day. And as I repeat this, I mean, it's a potential maximum. and it provides us with another flexibility to monitor, to adjust, and ensure that we stay within the TCY that's been identified for the recreational fishery, but also provide the opportunity to catch more if things are going relatively slow. So I just wanted to provide that perspective as well, Glenn, about why this is important to us to have that additional tool and flexibility.
With that process now is that some of those measures that are defined pre-season can't be changed in season. So when we define something like a size limit or an annual limit, those go on a fisher's license, and the license is issued, and once that happens, we got to ride it out the rest of the way. So using those tools, just a moment please, using those tools in season to make changes based on the catch data that we're collecting month by month to monitor catch against the allocation isn't an option for us. However, if we had the flexibility to change the daily limit from something like from say 2 to 3, if our progress in catch against the allocation was slower than we forecasted, we are able to change that in season. So that's a particular reason why this tool would be really useful as a way of managing the fishery. And then my other comment was just that, I hear the concern. I think we heard it in the conference board sentiments and certainly from Commissioner Yamada about the idea of sort of potential advantages. And I would just voice my own real concern about that becoming a basis for decision making or for, what kinds of provisions or tools we're going to allow jurisdictions to use. And the reason I think that's important is that, much as Doug, I've forgotten your last name, was describing just moments ago, there are a variety of tools you can use, and based on a whole bunch of considerations, some may be viewed as most suitable to achieve your goals in that particular area. And it's the same here. And one could easily argue that 2 fish per day with no size limit is certainly an advantage in Alaska compared to the measures that we've chosen to implement for the recreational fishery in BC. And so on it goes with what we might define in terms of annual limits or other elements. And so I think there's a lot for us to benefit from in acknowledging that each area and fishery therein has an opportunity to catch its allocation and to define the tools that are going to be most appropriate for making that happen. And that's what I'm hoping that we can arrive at as a solution here and as an approach for the commission going forward. Thanks.
Our stakeholders don't have the clarity in what your application of this rule would be. So if the rule had a lot more specificity as to, when, I kind of look at this like an EO in the United States. It's an emergency order that is applied upon a regulation that's already in effect. That does not come through in this one sentence, so more clarity as to when this might be imposed might lower the level of anxiety going forward. And, it's pretty difficult right now to craft language that will accomplish that. So going forward, probably that might be a solution to this disconnect between what you're trying to do and the language as it's written right now. Thank you.
I'll note we did not have the opportunity to see this at the interim meeting, and so there may have been a number of stakeholders who were not familiar with this as a potential management approach, are not familiar with the way that Canada manages the fisheries. I'll also note, at least within the United States, as Richard
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Glenn. I think we had spoken earlier in this meeting at the Financial Committee, Finance and Administration Committee, about the need for a special session to deal with the fiscal year 2023 budget because we needed a little bit more time there as well. And I wonder if it would be worthwhile adding this to the agenda to provide the U.S. to have some opportunity to think about this some more, and maybe we can provide some more information that would help address some of the questions that you just posed, and same with Richard. And I think we were speaking about maybe doing that about roughly a month or so from now, and if that would help the U.S., then we would, I think we could go along with that. Obviously, we would be quite disappointed not to make a decision at this meeting, but I think we could see if we could try to get along and figure this out rather than, having a confrontation over this regulatory proposal.
I certainly appreciate that, Paul, and I think that could be really helpful for us. I also will note that shortly after this meeting concludes, there is an opportunity for the North Pacific Fishery Management Council to meet, and we often provide an overview of issues that arise out of this commission meeting. So this would be another opportunity if we had a better understanding, maybe a quick primer on issues related to DFO management, any data or observations about how this management measure used this last year when part of a COVID measure, and maybe a better understanding of some of the potential use of this measure in the future. That's one venue that I think could be very useful for us to reach a fairly broad number of U.S. stakeholders and provide them some better understanding about this proposal.
Yeah, that's, we would be supportive of that, Glenn. I think we can provide information that would help.
Appreciate that. With that, I believe what we would be considering at this time is deferring action on this regulatory proposal until consideration at a future special session. I don't know that we necessarily need a motion on this, but we can certainly do that, Dr. Wilson, if you think procedurally that would be best.
Thanks, Chair. No, we'll simply add that into the text of the report, that it will be addressed at the upcoming special session. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for providing an opportunity for us to continue dialogue on this. I think, obviously we want to be able to continue to work collaboratively, and I think this is obviously an important proposal for Canada, and I appreciate the willingness to provide additional opportunity for U.S. stakeholders to better understand this proposal moving forward. With that, I believe that takes us to proposal C1. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If we can bring that to the screen. Thank you. So proposal C1, this is one stakeholders proposal that has been submitted to the IPHC for consideration at this session of the annual meeting. And this proposal has to do with an exception that allows recreational fishermen on pleasure craft in Alaska regulatory areas to process specific halibut for eating and or preservation. And this is subject to measures to facilitate enforcement of the applicable daily bag limits. And I will point you to a specific language that has been proposed in C1 at the end of this document. And I apologize, the A, B, and C should be also in red. This is all part of this additional text that is proposed. And also please note that we have Mr. Fields and his counsel, Mr. Schroeder, who are here available to answer any of your additional questions or provide additional background on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll turn to other commissioners to see if they have questions or request additional clarification. Commissioner Yamato.
Been meeting, and the biggest issue that I think Alaska has is enforcing the bag limits. So when, how do you enforce that when the fish are still in possession limits on a vessel? It's very hard for enforcement to be able to count fish when it's chunked up into many pieces. And so that's why we have this rule in the IPHC regulations about having 4 fletches and 2 cheeks. So enforcement can count the fletches and be able to enforce a bag limit. So we haven't forgotten this proposal. I think it's a regulatory issue. Regulators, enforcement will have a difficult time the way the proposal is written to enforce. So we'd like to kind of continue and let you know that we haven't put this on a very big back burner, but we'd like to have time to work with enforcement to see if we can come up with a regulation that meets your request to be able to consume some halibut on a vessel while at sea. And we'd like to potentially move this to an intersessional meeting so it can get addressed as a, in the near future and not get too far down the line. But just to assure you that we do see the practicality of it, and we'd like to address it, potentially in a different kind of regulation proposal than you have here in your document. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Yamada. And if I may, perhaps it would be helpful at this point to at least provide an opportunity for the proposer, if there are additional comments or perspective that you would like to share with us about this proposal.
Yes, I was trying to make sure my microphone worked. Can you hear me, Mr. Commissioner? Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank you all for considering the proposal. I mean, we've been sitting here listening to you all deal with a number of weighty issues, weighty economic issues, and while ours is not that, you know, issues that affect both of our countries, affect people's livelihoods. So it's great work that you're doing, and we appreciate you taking the opportunity to consider our proposal, which is not so weighty, but also provides frustration to private anglers in parts of our state up here in Alaska. I'm here in Alaska. When John Fields asked us to try to figure out a way to make this proposal to the commission, we didn't want to make a big change. That's not what we were trying for. We were looking for something incremental and proportionate. So if you look at our proposal, it's an option. It doesn't change the existing language. It adds an option. It was structured only for private anglers because we understood that once you get the commercial folks involved, sensitivities can somewhat change there. And it was not intended to change the overall structure that we read in the CSP in other parts of the area outside of Alaska in 2C and 3A, where the standard is that you just can't cut and mutilate the fish to an extent where you can't tell whether the bag limits are being met. We tried to meet that standard, and I just want everybody to understand that we tried to do that. We tried to make it proportional to what we saw the issue being. I appreciate Commissioner Yamada. I've spoken to him before. As the chair mentioned, we've talked to the folks at NOAA to try to get a handle on how we can do this and fit the enforcement needs. I'm a former U.S. attorney and Coast Guard guy, so I understand the enforcement perspective, and we wanted to make sure we met that as well. Of course, we'd like you to just select our option today and vote with it and go, so that Mr. Fields can enjoy the fish next time he goes fishing. But I understand what you're all trying to do. I would like to give Mr. Fields an opportunity. I think he can explain to you kind of his level of concern, being the kind of the fisherman who it was in the middle of this. So if Mr. Fields would like to get on and make a few comments. Mr. Chair, he might be having some issues connecting. I know there was where he was located. There we were concerned there might be some issues. But let me add one more thing. It's that maybe that's him, Mr. Fields. In the meantime, let me add one more thing. I appreciate what Commissioner Yamada said about this being related primarily related to consumption, but I think there still is that processing aspect to it. Somebody who goes out on a day trip can bring their halibut back, process it at their home, and there's no issue. Somebody who's out for multi-days, or I know in the 2018 proposals you all got from sport fishers, there were some liveaboards. Those people have a lot harder time dealing with the fish. We all know the fish is better when it's processed or eaten fresh. And I just ask, as we proceed along at this point, we keep that in mind too, to try to find a way not to just allow consumption, but to allow a level of processing that lets each of these folks, these recreational anglers, enjoy their fish.
our enforcement and compliance interests. So thank you.
Perhaps the best course of action, and one not dissimilar to the one recommended by the conference board, is that we would defer further consideration to a future meeting, and then hopefully be able to spend time to further describe the potential wording of this proposal that hopefully can accommodate the interests of the public to be able to have some limited consumption on board, but to define it in a way that ensures that bag limits are properly maintained. And then, Mr. Davis, I believe your comments about wanting that we might be able to come up with language that could be uniform across both the US and Canada. If that makes sense to folks, then thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments or perspectives? Okay. I believe we have a
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that concludes the regulatory proposals portion for today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We do have just 3 public comments, questions, if you're willing to take those. And then I just want to remind everybody, and after we close there, I'd just like to pass to our Setline Survey Coordinator, Kayla, who's going to speak about the informational session that's being held tonight. So I just want to keep that on the radar. But we can bring up the questions. Secretariat, and then actually maybe Kayla, if you're available and share with your indulgence, I might just pass to Kayla to quickly outline what's going to happen with that session. And then at the end of this presentation, we can bring up that slide with the meeting link on it. So just hold off on that one. I'll pass to Kayla. Are you there?
Perhaps Dr. Wilson, if I may, just briefly while we're waiting. Oh, there you are.
Hello, can you hear me?
You can. Thank you.
Hi, yes. Sorry about that. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Yes, we will be holding our Fishery Independent Setline Survey information session this evening, immediately following the end of the annual meeting tonight. This slide here does show 5:15 p.m. Obviously, whenever we are done with the public comments and questions, we will commence this informational session. Our plan is to discuss any updates in the tender specifications from 2021 to 2022, as well as just provide an opportunity for anybody that has any questions in general to ask those questions. And yeah, me as well as my entire team and Dr. Stewart will be available.
Great, thank you very much, Kayla. And so we'll put this slide back up with the meeting link once we finish today. And so, Chair, you're going to comment? Sorry. Thank you very much. So apologies to these speakers. They provided their questions just after the session on Tuesday had been uploaded, and so they weren't given an opportunity to speak. And so the first one is a verbal comment, and I would like to pass to Linda Benkin. If you could activate her microphone, please, Secretariat. Okay, we might have to try that one again in a little while, and we'll come back. So, Malcolm, if you're there, we can give you the microphone to address your comment. If not, I can read it. I know in the past we've had problems with Malcolm's microphone, and so Malcolm, I'm going to take the liberty to read it, but if you are able to activate your microphone, please do chip in. So Malcolm's from the North Pacific Fisheries Association, and his point was regarding Agenda Item 7, the Management Strategy Evaluation, and specifically regarding slides 12 and 13 of Alan's MSE presentation, which demonstrate how much the IPHC has deviated from its established management procedure. It's notable how the range is significantly higher in Area 2, and in all cases equal or higher than the management procedure, the current management procedure. This increased harvest has come at a direct cost to other regulatory areas and likely the resource in general. Dr. Stewart's slide 25 highlights the 17% decline in spawning biomass from 2016 to 2022. As United States stakeholders, we look forward to establishing a management procedure that will rebalance these inequalities, and there will not be a need for a slide showing decision-making variability. So more a comment. I'll pause, see if Malcolm's there, or if anybody would like to respond at all before we move on. Okay, not seeing either. And then there is two parts to Chris Sporer's written comment. Chris is from the PHMA of BC, and this is regarding the contracting party national reports. It is quite lengthy. Would you like me to read it, Chair, or just pause and let everybody read it? It might be easier.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Why don't we pause for a minute and then we can read the comment.
Right, and also the second page, Chair. Great, thank you very much, Chair. I do see we have Linda Bankin online, and so we can try and activate her microphone, and we'll go back to her question. Thank you, Linda. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much. Looks like you're hearing me, and I want to apologize for when I submitted this, I had asked for an opportunity to speak, and that's why the topics noted down didn't make any sense when read. I had intended to speak to these. And at this point, I think I will skip the first two and just to highlight, and I think you've heard some of this from the US side in the conference report, but just the importance that our organization places on moving to a new strategy for apportioning or distributing the TCY between areas that is based on the survey's abundance, using the fishery independent setline survey, or either 1 year or an average of 3 years, but really does build off that survey as the most effective and objective measure of how the stock is distributed. That's really important, or one of what we would like to see being a guiding focus moving forward. Also important to us, this commitment that the apportionment or distribution is done in a way that the harvest by any one contracting party does not negatively affect the yield available from the waters of the other contracting party by one or the other harvesting beyond the surveyed abundance found off the coasts of that contracting party. And I would just note that this national shares and the interim agreement was in effect tested by the MSAB. I'm not a member of that group, but did look at results that showed there was a negative impact to the Alaska areas, and that impact is particularly profound on Area 2C, where it's affected broadly, but also affected by a decline over time in the spawning biomass in Region 2 of up to 17%. So a lot of concerns from the people that I represent who fish in 2C, 3A, as well as other Gulf areas, by what those effects have been. Want to make sure those don't continue, and that as you move ahead, you keep that as a focus of what guides your policy, your harvest policy moving forward. We also think there's some important equity issues to consider relative to the impacts of stakeholders across all areas, from the harvest policy as well as the funding of this organization, and an importance of being very balanced in the approach of how we are supporting the research and the work of the Commission, and how we are distributing the benefits that accrue to halibut stakeholders, to be equitable and to be mindful of all who are participants in the halibut fishery and halibut industry. And I will end there, but thanks so much for giving me another opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Bankin. I'll pause to see if there's any questions. Not seeing any. So perhaps Dr. Wilson, with your indulgence, we could just briefly touch on the issues that we need to address tomorrow. And then I did have one specific issue I did want to bring up under other business, and I'll also then pause and see if there's other comments from other commissioners. As I understand it, tomorrow, final agenda items
Thank you, Chair. That is my current collation of all the remaining decision points. Thanks, Chair. Yes, through the chair, we can certainly accommodate that, no problem at all. So the team will be online at this link in case there's somebody who doesn't want to attend the delegation meeting, but they will hold general discussions only and then commence the session in 30 minutes after the close of this session. Thank you very much, no problem.
Hopefully we will have a smooth and speedy morning tomorrow. So look forward to seeing you all in the morning. Have a good night.
Thanks, Glenn. See you tomorrow.